to see you again. Wonderful. Okay, so why don't we get rolling here? Hi, Miami. Oh, Israel. Almost 4 continents. Okay, so why don't we get started? I'm just going to organize so I can see the chat and everybody and everything going on all at once. So welcome to another ArtEvolve event. We are now over a year here of ArtEvolve events. We started last April in 2020, so very exciting to still have this going and still have it going strong with some wonderful guests. Today, we're going to be talking about making meaningful connections with the art community online. And our expert guests are Louise Hamlin and Deborah Najarjosa, who are both co-founders of Art Mavens. So, Louise and Deborah, will you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your backgrounds?
Yeah, of course. Shall I start, Deborah?
Absolutely.
So hi, everyone, and big thank you, Mackenzie and Annika and Emma, for inviting us to join today. So my background is that I'm an art history graduate from the Courtauld, and then after graduation worked for about 15 years with the art newspaper. And during that time, I guess really saw the globalization of the art world. It just kind of boomed, and we started doing all sorts of interesting projects globally. All the art fairs, we started doing daily papers for the art fairs. We started publishing a Chinese edition of the art newspaper, a Russian edition. So it's a really exciting time. And then I had a family and decided to go down a slightly different route and become more of an independent. And the basis I decided was really to create a conference for the art market, and really to get just the different sectors and communities of the art world to meet. And so the Art Business Conference started in 2014, and then we launched it in New York in 2017, and then in Shanghai in 2018. And I was just about to host the New York Art Business Conference at the end of March 2020. And then the pandemic hit. And so since then, Deborah and I have been working furiously behind the scenes to create Art Mavens, which we'll talk about in a bit.
And so I am Deborah. Thank you also for having us, and thanks to all in the room. It's a real privilege to be together. I come from a slightly different background. I'm an economist by training. I spent a decade in finance and private equity. I then spent a decade in luxury, and then I was born in an art family. My mother's a concert pianist, and my father was a thinker, writer, and supporter of artists. And invariably, as one does, I found myself pulled into the arts. And I started working for Bonhams, the auction house in the Middle East. I lived in Dubai for 14 years. I then opened a private museum at Al Serkal Avenue in Dubai called the John Paul Najjar Foundation, and moved back to Europe after 14 years in Dubai 2.5 years ago. And Louise and I got together and decided to develop Art Mavens. So here's where I'm at.
Wow, you both have quite the international journeys. I love that. That's great.
And that's not counting the air miles from traveling to fairs and biennials.
Yeah. That I think is, an uncountable number. I'm not sure we could calculate that for either of you. So thank you for introducing both of yourselves and for joining us today. So just a heads up to everyone who's with us for today's event. We, of course, our topic today is community. So please engage with us in the chat, in the comments. You have a question about what we're talking about. You have something to add. I'm going to be reading regularly throughout the entire event. And then, of course, if you have a question that you want answered at the end, you can use the Q&A section. All right, so for those attendees who are not familiar with it, will you introduce us briefly to Art Mavens?
Sure, yes. So Art Mavens, perhaps we should talk about the name actually and how we came about it. Mavens means expert or knowledge. And I know from having run the Art Business Conference how many brilliant experts there are across the whole of the art world, and how specialist and trained they are. So Deborah and I have created, basically, it's a community app. It's downloadable in the so it's downloadable basically on both Android and iPhone, unlike some other apps that have become quite popular recently. And it's also available on desktop. And so the concept and idea basically is that it's for members to exchange and to share knowledge and expertise about the art world and with art world peers. So the community, it's an invitation only community. So our members are vetted. And within that community, you can join specialist membership groups. For example, we've set up membership groups for some trade associations, and then we've set up some specialist interest and topic groups. So for insurance, filming art and artists, NFTs, and also within the community, we have listed art professional events. I think Deborah and I have noticed our inboxes are very, very full. And so what we want to try to do is to share as much of that information knowledge as possible. So we have a full listing events directory. And then also, obviously, for really important updates, you can post press releases as well. So I guess the idea is that it's kind of your go-to as an art professional to kind of share information. And we're in the process now of looking at establishing also geographical groups where art specialists from the same region can network together as well. So that's the community. And I should really say that also the community is really kind of the sort of nucleus and meeting points. And we're actually in the process of also developing a series of tools for art professionals. One in particular that I think we're really excited to talk about today, and that's called Art Mavens Pro. I wonder if I've spoken enough already.
No, it's good. I like the background.
This onto Deborah.
Thanks. So Art Mavens Pro, we launched nearly a month ago. And it's really the beginning of a series of products and applications that we're developing to service our community. And of course, with all that's been happening over the past year, and that's still happening in many regions and really does break our hearts. But specifically in our industry, there's a shift happening in the way that people work. And we wanted to facilitate the obtention of freelance work and gigs, which are increasingly part of the income, whether it's supplemental or full income for art professionals. So Art Mavens Pro is a platform where everything is automated. It's a marketplace, if you will, where vetted, again, art professionals can list their profile, and where companies and organizations around the world can find freelance talent. And what's really exciting about it, of course, is that with the technology, we have a global scale. We're able to make connections that naturally one wouldn't be able to find an individual collector in Malaysia who may need a write-up, or a museum in Sao Paulo that needs a translation or a restoration advice. Mm-hmm. And to create those connections, but also to raise awareness that there are certain things that you may think that as a medium-sized gallery, for example, you wouldn't have access to. And guess what? On Mavens Pro, through professional freelancers, many things become possible. So it's really about creating opportunities and systems to facilitate freelance employment for art professionals.
That's great. I like that sort of variety of, having a suite of different sort of solutions for the different, kind of challenges that you come up against. And I know that I haven't had as much time as I would like to explore Art Mavens, but I know that Emma, our communications manager, uses it quite a lot. And, she really sort of enjoys being able to go through and see the different conversations that are happening and the different announcements that different organizations have. And I look forward to how kind of Art Mavens Pro adds on to that. So let's talk about, you've mentioned this a little bit, but, how did the idea for this online platform for art professionals, or multiple platforms, come about? Where did it really start?
Should I go in? It's a COVID baby. It really is. As Louise was saying, we were both, we'd been speaking for years, and Louise and I have actually seen each other in person only a few times at the Art Business Conference, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But we kept brainstorming, and I think that we're living in a very collaborative world where, we exchange ideas, and we have I think we all have our peers and our buddies with who we exchange, especially as we go along the entrepreneurial route. And Louise and I were really exchanging and finding in both our worlds that in between our big events, I also am on boards of different nonprofits and took care of the global private museum networks, and found that there were big events, and then in the middle of those two, there was maybe a lack of touch points of regularity, a place to exchange and convene. And that's really how it came about. But what's fascinating, and is such a sign of our times, is that since we started the company and working on Mavens, Louise and I have never been together in the same room. She's in the UK, I'm in Switzerland.
Yeah.
We have some people working with us. We've had people working with us out of Malaysia and Ukraine, and I mean, all over the world, Delhi, and it's just incredible to see all that can be achieved when there's a vision and there's a motivation, and there's some great technology, and I think there's many of us who have operated in that way, and been surprised by the good results. So that's how really it all started, and it's been a really good partnership so far.
That's great. Well, and I think especially when you're developing a project like that is meant for remote interaction, and you're developing it also in a remote environment, it sort of makes you immediately identify, how you're going to be able to best kind of suit that type of community, because you are that type of community already, right? You're not working together in an office when you're developing it. So.
Well, we're patient zero, right? We were the first one to miss the touch points with our peers, with our art family, and that was really what drove everything we built.
That's great. Oh, and Renata says in the comment, she said, "I can confirm Art Mavens is an amazing community."
Thank you, Renata. Hello. Thank you.
So, if we're thinking about, besides Art Mavens, in your experiences, because I know that you did a lot of market research kind of in the leading up to launching the platform, what sorts of spaces do art professionals typically interact in online?
So I guess in terms of online, a lot of the kind of social media, Instagram, we know is huge. I think maybe more for artists than art professionals. So yeah, I think probably more for artists. Obviously, you've got other social media like LinkedIn, Twitter. I think where Deborah and I had sort of felt that we hadn't really seen anywhere that has that kind of developed, curated feed for art professionals. So you tend to be kind of bouncing about a little bit. But I guess for art professionals, perhaps LinkedIn has been a good platform. And I think what I've noticed certainly since last March is I think a lot of art professionals have developed their own blogs, their own kind of own ways and means of communicating, which has been interesting to watch as well.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Some research came out about freelancers, and this is not specific to the arts, but it was interesting to see that many of them promote themselves on social media, close to 3/4. The leading, and this blew my mind, but it's there, the leading media to promote your freelance work is actually Facebook.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
followed by by LinkedIn, and then with Instagram, that's slowly rising in the ranks, but not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So that's also a surprise in terms of the medium. But the surprises are multiple, because if you look at NFTs, for example, the favorite medium of exchange on NFTs is actually Twitter, which is kind of weird because it is a visual, NFT art is visual, and yet you find yourself going on Twitter to get all the information. So you just kind of have to see where the people are going.
Yeah, it's a bit of a scattered conversation. It's not in one place. So I'm curious, anyone who's with us today, where do you spend your time online? What, interacting with other art professionals? Is there a favorite social media site that you have used, especially over the period of the pandemic, right, where we can't always be in person with people? I'd be interested to hear, what everyone is, where everyone has interacted up till now. I think, the interesting thing as well, when you look at these different platforms and how they're used by art professionals in particular, not just artists, something, funny that I noticed too, and I guess that makes sense that Facebook is therefore first, is that there are actually a lot of art professionals, especially those who kind of, especially a lot of freelancers who don't even have a LinkedIn account. They're not on LinkedIn, right? Yeah. And so for me, I mean, obviously I'm coming from also a tech background. And so I'm like, what is going on? Where are these people? How do I find them? So yeah, I mean, I think that having kind of a central space that's specifically built, for the needs of the industry, which are so different, because I bet part of the reason that Facebook is first is because a big reason that naturally that you make connections in the art community are through your personal connections, right? So,
yeah.
Of course, yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the other platform that's developed that Clarenza, I think, has just mentioned through the pandemic. And I think January was our kind of rabbit hole moment, Deborah, with Clubhouse as well. And that's been really, really interesting. Mm-hmm. It's been really interesting to watch. And again, I don't know how many art professionals have kind of been on. I mean, I think Clubhouse, has been instrumental in terms of the NFT craze as well. I mean, I think there's another talk this evening, in fact, on NFTs and the art world. I mean, it's the two of them in parallel have absolutely boomed.
Yeah, Clubhouse is an interesting one because it's entirely, auditory medium, of course. So
I think what I loved about Clubhouse initially was just hearing all the global voices.
Yes.
That's what I think when I first went in, I just loved it. And I'm finding it's slightly harder to navigate now. I don't know whether other art professionals are finding this, but it just doesn't feel quite as communal as it was somehow.
It's gotten big. I think
yeah,
that's part of it.
And I think this is it. I think this is what Deborah and I keep sort of talking about and exchanging about, and just listening yesterday, the sort of comments, obviously a certain person is, I think, being banned from Facebook, and kind of what that means for perhaps a future campaign. And there is, I think, that element of something that can become perhaps too big, that it's quite difficult to then manage that and then manage engagement, and also engagement of those members as well. I think that's really important. That's really crucial. And so that's what we kind of want to try to develop, is something that has very much an international platform and international voices, but that it still feels like a community, that it hasn't kind of maybe got slightly out of control.
Yeah, well, I think the thing too, I mean, particularly when you're thinking about some of these younger social medias like Clubhouse, part of the reason that social medias like Instagram and Twitter work so well is not actually the social part, but it's actually the search engine part of the platform that really allows you to be able to organize that information in a way that is easily accessible, right? Because if you're having, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of conversations going on at once, if you can't find those conversations easily, that's immediately going to block people from being able to engage, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's an issue with Clubhouse, is that their search system is not quite up to par. Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
the growing pains, right? They just became so big so quickly that
Yeah.
I don't think they were able to develop everything they wanted to in time.
Right.
There's also an alternative, a Swiss alternative to Clubhouse called Angle. And I think Facebook is about to launch also a similar a similar media, but as Clarenza, is it Clarenza? Apologies. No, Emma pointed out that it's weird, saying that it's weird that they're not recording the talks on Clubhouse. And that's one thing that I've really enjoyed, is that there's that sense of casualness. It kind of feels like a pirate radio where you could just, go in and experiment and try, and that was refreshing, certainly.
Yeah. So, and it looks like a lot of people in the comments are saying Instagram, some do LinkedIn, agreeing about Clubhouse getting too big. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and by the way, just me commenting on these social media, it doesn't just come from me making up things in my mind. I actually am a digital communications professor on the side. So that's, I tend to know too much about social media, for my own comfort. Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about, how our online interactions, those that you've created in Art Mavens or those that we find in other spaces, kind of compare to the traditional art world networking spaces, which are all physical, right? Art fairs and conferences and things like that. Especially, obviously, because Louise, you run the Art Business Conference.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. I mean, we've designed Mavens, the community app, with very much to be the hybrid tool going forward. So there's some really kind of cool tech that will really enable people, once they kind of start traveling again, to be able to interact once they're traveling. So we're really excited about that. And I think we want it to be the perfect complement. I mean, IRL will return. I think it's just questionable. We've seen that kind of hyper locality, haven't we, where everyone's kind of really gone into their own sort of communities. And yeah, I mean, I'm hoping we will start sort of traveling again, and that actually the digital community can be, as an app, you can kind of take it with you, so you can be wherever you want to be, but actually also be communicating with your peers at a live event. And that's the kind of beauty of what we've developed. Is it has that kind of real-time communication when we're all together again. I mean, we've become absolutely cemented to our tech, and I'm sure that will continue. But yeah, I guess we're all missing, aren't we, the IRL?
Well, we have certainly friends who are IRLing in New York right now at Freeze, which seems surreal and super exciting. And it's going to be so interesting to see what happens as we move towards that hybrid model that we are all really looking forward to, and bridging both.
Yeah. So it looks like in the comments, Vesna's saying she's interested in Clubhouse, but she hasn't been invited yet. So if anyone has an invite left for Clubhouse and would like to share it with Vesna, go ahead and send her a message.
Vesna, send me your cell phone number in private message on the chat, and I'll send you an invite right after the call.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think having this hybrid approach is nice, right? Being able to have both, the best of both worlds in the end is what we're going to want. So when you were creating Art Mavens, why did you decide to create something different than how existing social networking works?
It's a great question. For me personally, I just wasn't finding anything out there that was giving me professional insight, advice, guidance. For me, it's really simple. I wasn't finding anywhere that curated art world feed where I kind of felt that I could engage with art world peers. I mean, I guess it's really as simple as that for me. It's why we founded the community. Deborah, don't you want to talk a bit more about Pro as well?
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think for Pro, it's very much a similar approach. It's just wanting to facilitate and connect, and actually, we've been really intrigued. We were speaking to a brilliant arts educator, and she's unfortunately not on the call today, but and she was telling us how much her job had changed over the last 12 months. So she goes from being at one of the very big LA institutions with huge groups and constant programs, and suddenly she's in her apartment trying to figure out how to make plasticine models and locate her iPhone and the light to get a good video for public programming online. And it dawned upon us as well that, you know, so many jobs can be done remotely. And whereas maybe 12 months ago, you wouldn't have hired a freelance, a freelance remote senior executive, that's now become something completely acceptable. And also thinking about, okay, how do we respond to that, and yeah, I guess keep connecting everybody, keep creating opportunities going. So yeah, that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah, that's great.
There's nowhere today, and I saw that Sylvain is on the call, and Sylvain is a wonderful collector of Chinese art and one of the most forward-thinking collectors in terms of using digital. And I think that we are all constantly looking for where the talent is and how we can bring it on and exchange the ideas and keep growing, and that's exciting too.
Yeah, I mean, I hope this is an exciting time actually for the ArtEvolve community, because we're building this from the ground up. And so I think, you know, part of that is that we also really want to have feedback from members and incoming members in terms of the content that they want to be reading about as well. So if there are specific maybe topic groups, subject groups, we've got some focus groups within the community already that are you know, groups of individuals that maybe are in the same trade organization together. But it'd be great to start connecting people more. So if there are specific working groups or focus groups that we can establish in the community, we'd love to do that.
Well, I'd love to talk to you guys about that more too.
Okay, great. I mean, so tech is a big one for us. I mean, really to start that group and community would be great.
Yeah, I would love that.
Likewise on Pro, it's been so interesting because as freelancers have onboarded, we've discovered amazing professionals that we hadn't thought of. And it comes to mind a collector's coach. Doesn't position himself as an art advisor, but as a collecting coach, which I think is such a cool approach, or the diversity consultants. And so we're super open, you know, if we've forgotten your amazing professional category, please reach out. We would love to add it. And we're sure there are a lot of companies and organizations out there who need your talent.
Yeah, and especially when you're thinking about, we're already in, I mean, I consider the art market to be quite large because it's global, right? But it is niche under the realm of, you know, global capitalism. And then of course, within our niche market, we have these little corners, these jobs that maybe, you know, 20 people in the world do that one thing. So, you know, that's a really great experience to be able to have a space that it's easy to find those people, right?
And maybe to find a translator who actually knows the art terminology rather than accidentally hiring a medical translator for an exhibition essay.
Has that happened before to you, Deborah?
It really has. And it was a ruthless, very philosophical essay by a French artist called Christian Bonnefoy. And the translation it took longer for me to try to edit the translation than to do it over from scratch. So yeah, there's a sore spot there.
That comes up a lot for us as well, because we're, you know, we have in Articheck a lot of different templates, and we want to make sure that they're available in as many languages as possible. So this is like a big, you know, translation project that we're working on that will take probably a couple years, because we have 7 languages right now that we're working through. And yeah, making sure that it's not just, you know, someone who speaks the two languages, but someone who actually knows the correct terminology for the industry in the two languages. I mean, you know, I've been on calls just for Italian because that's my second language, where we've had, you know, 20-minute conversations around what to call different types of glass. Like, I mean, it's, yeah, I think it's, you know, it's very nuanced. So it's important to have someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, it really is, and it really does take experience and knowledge. So it's important to get it right. But come and see, there are some really great translators on Mavens.
Okay, we'll have to check it out. So, what do you think are the keys to building community online?
I guess it's, you know, it's shared values, isn't it? It's shared values, shared passions. As you say, we're building this from the ground up. So we want our members to shine, to be the individuals to kind of collectively build this. But yeah, definitely shared values, shared insights. I think that's how you kind of, you build that community. Having, I guess, already done that to a certain degree with the Art Business Conference, in terms of bringing the different communities of the art world together, whether they were maybe auctioneers or gallerists, or working in museums. There were kind of shared topics that really united, that everyone was sort of challenging with, you know, whether it's the move to digital art and technology, or issues around maybe insurance, looking at the public and private and how they can work together. Anti-money laundering, that's a big one. Sure. So yeah, I mean, I think purely from an art professional perspective, that's sort of in terms of sort of thinking about community. And I suppose all of us, ultimately, we all want to feel like we belong. And I think this past year, we've all raised questions about kind of who we are, what we're doing, where we're going. And, you know, some parts of our community have faded away a bit. And so I suppose what we're hoping to do is to help rebuild those connections. I think the other thing from a community point of view that Deborah and I have talked about a lot, are people who are maybe have just graduated, or maybe are 2 or 3 years into working in the art world, who maybe aren't in a position, I mean, none of us have been in a position to network, but actually these are the years where it's really where you're learning so much by networking, and you're not simply just having these opportunities anymore. So I've seen some great initiatives that have merged out of lockdown. There's been a great initiative called Art Market Mentors, which has taken some really senior people across the art world, with obviously sort of, you know, post-grad qualifications, and matching them in a mentorship scheme. And I think, again, that's the kind of, this is what we kind of want to foster, is that we have thought leaders on the platform, but we also have people who are maybe just getting into the industry, and that actually the kind of knowledge and resources and information that we have here are supportive and informative.
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously the more organizations that also put and make themselves available to sort of bringing these postgrads in, that's something that we actually at Artitech do as much as we can, right? We have a number of, I mean, just because of the fact that I am also a professor. So I also, you know, have the access to the universities here. And so we've pulled in the past year 2 team members who either are finishing school or just finished school. So it's nice to, you know, even if it's just giving them the opportunity to kind of learn the industry and do something while they're finishing school or right after school, to, you know, as many companies as possible that can give that access, or as many institutions as possible that can give that access, I think is, you know, for the better.
Yeah, it's great. Great. We've actually set up some alumni groups actually within the community as well. So people can kind of keep track. We're sort of posting updates from their universities, so they can kind of, you know, it's the one-stop shop. You've kind of got the art professional information and topic groups, but then you've also got your kind of alumni groups to stay in touch with as well.
Oh, wonderful. So let's see, I have a question in here. Vesna, which parts of the community have somewhat faded?
Oh, that's a great question. I would rephrase that slightly and say we're so new and so young that maybe they haven't faded, but they're yet to be lit and populated. And I think this is what we've created, right? Is to encourage everybody to post. And so I'd say rather than parts of the community, it's actually about encouraging people to post more.
Mm-hmm.
There are, I'm just trying to think of groups. NFTs hasn't faded.
Yeah.
NFTs is going strong. Really strong. There's so much content coming out on this. It's really hard to keep. It's really hard to keep up with, actually. So we try to kind of to post there so people can just keep updated. I mean, it's literally, the media is awash with NFT content at the moment. So we're just trying to kind of pull it all together to make sense of it.
Yeah. The other interesting thing is on the community, Vesna, in answer to your question, is that there's also the possibility of creating secret groups. So we have a trade organization that has a visible presence where they post on the community for everyone to see. Mm-hmm. Then they have a members only, which is called a private group, where they will accept you if you are a member of the organization. And then finally, they have a secret group, which is where they discuss with their board. And so typically, that's something that none of us are privy to if we're not on the board. But so there's quite a bit going on behind the scenes as well, where it's being used, and that's so wonderful, because one thing that COVID has transformed is we're all working in a very collaborative way, all of us. And I think, Mackenzie, there's no conversation, I'm sure in Articheck's case as well, that you haven't had where it was open-ended and it was like, how can we share this? How can we work together? And that's been a lot of fun. So we're really excited to onboard different groups, be they gallery associations, be they alumni groups, or indeed trade associations. That's really an exciting route for us.
Yeah. Well, I think something that's interesting as well is having all of those different layers of an organization in one place, because up until now, sort of the upper echelons of a lot of those sort of its different organizations, I think have been kind of in a strange way within the art world, like unofficial, so they don't have a website. They don't have like any central location where you can sort of access these top level, high executive groups. And so having a place where at least they exist and the conversations are being had and they're attached to other more public conversations, I think is a really kind of nice way to open up sort of the lines of communication, right?
I think it solves a problem for many organizations. Developing the tech, as you know, is a full-time job in itself. So they're busy enough that the last thing they need is to have to go away and develop their apps and their community software.
Yeah, definitely. Or even just, reply to 100+ email chain that never gets checked, Yeah. So let's see, for art professionals, more individual art professionals, how can they improve their individual online networking and community building? What can they do?
Yeah. I was going to say, Mackenzie, I think as you mentioned earlier, I mean, social media, I mean, having a presence across all of them, but actually, I guess also, it's the old adage, isn't it, about content is king. So really making your presence kind of stand out and maybe thinking about your specific audience. So we know kind of, Instagram maybe has a slightly more informal tone to it, but obviously in LinkedIn, you kind of maybe want to have a slightly sort of more professional look. But I think, yeah, you probably do need to, you need to have a digital presence. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think interestingly, Louise and I were discussing, and nowadays job seekers go way beyond the CV. They cultivate their online presence, as you were saying, Louise. They have their blogs. They might be filming regular videos. It's really about putting yourself out there, hopefully in a way that adds value and is meaningful and not just promotional. But it's really important to be present and to keep reading and looking and understanding and sharing. It's the key. It's the key to everything.
Yeah, and I think, you know, creating blogs, if you have the time, definitely go for it. But even just going onto a platform like Art Mavens and participating in the conversation, that's content creation, right? So, yeah, I mean, I know not everyone has time to be able to, you know, do it all.
And I guess that's again with the community, is that we hope you can kind of dip in and dip out depending on what your commitments are, like your time commitments, that it's something you can kind of pick up, read, comment, and hopefully educate, both ways. So hopefully be educated, but vice versa, share your insights, and that you can do that 24/7 whenever is a good time for you.
Right, right.
And hopefully, if hopefully there's enough of your professional information that you need, be it the events, be it the news, be it the groups that you're a member of, being on Art Mavens. Hopefully that makes part of that job easier. Just going one place and not skimming through 30 emails.
Yeah,
might make things easier.
Definitely. So for art organizations, how can they go beyond their presence on social media? Because at this point, I think we've all established that organizations need to have social media channels, right? How can they go beyond that to more meaningfully interact with the art world community online?
yeah, good question.
I think similarly, I think that the organizations are increasingly aware. I mean, we've seen in the last 12 months, luxury brands taking to TikTok and museums taking to TikTok. And I think that they're very aware that they need to be speaking the languages of their audience as well. Mm-hmm. And it's increasingly important to be in touch with what's happening around.
And of their future audiences, right? So Gen Z, I mean, I think one of the most I bring this up a lot, but one of the most surprising TikTok accounts to me that's been successful is the Uffizi.
Yeah, case in point.
Yeah. So I highly recommend.
I was reading today, is that right, as a headline, that you're no longer allowed, you're not allowed to photograph in there now, is that right? Did I have a moment earlier? I think it was an art newspaper headline. I need to double check that. I'll double check that and come back to you.
Did someone stumble into a sculpture, or?
No, I think it's the revamp. They're not allowing photographs to be taken
because of the lawsuit. Maybe
the Uffizi does not allow influencers to use images. Thank you. Yeah, free of charge.
Oh. Well, do influencers go to the Uffizi?
They do now.
Yes. So I guess that means you're in the Uffizi and you take a selfie and something's behind you. You can't post that.
I think apparently so.
That's really interesting. Does our NFT IP specialist know if because surely there's no IP on the works inside the Uffizi, right? So what's that about?
Well, I think Clarenza has clarified with Chiara Ferragni, which is very true. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's one of the top Italian influencers. And she's also known a little bit as like a culture vulture. So I think she essentially will monetize images of herself with the works. So obviously that's not allowed, right? That's what I would guess, is that anywhere where it's being monetized, you can't have pictures. But I don't think they would have a problem with me taking a picture and posting it on social media, I would hope, right? Because that would probably kind of goes against the purpose of social media, right?
Yeah, right.
But maybe it could be a source of revenue for museums. I don't know. Oh, smart contracts with
Museums don't need revenue. They survive on clouds and sunshine.
I've just shared the link from the story today in the
okay, great.
So everyone can read it.
Thanks, Clarenza, for the clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. They pay like a fee Personal and private use. That makes sense. Yep. And the first picture in there is Chiara Ferragni. So there you go.
There you go. Right. Great. And I think just going back, Mackenzie, to your question about organizations and engagement,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a kind of discernible difference, isn't there, between kind of statistics, you know, having those stats, a super number of figures and followers, and then engagement.
Yeah.
And often the two are quite different.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it comes down to the sort of quality and quantity type. But again, for organizations, I think thinking about the different platforms and ways of engagement, we go back to TikTok again, don't we, Annie Fitzy? But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you have to make decisions, obviously, how you want to engage, right? So just for Articheck, we do post things on social media, but we tend to have the most engagement in these events, right? In our ArtEvolve series. And that works for us. And we don't need to have, you know, an Instagram post that blows up, right? We don't need to go viral on Instagram to be able to have, you know, valuable kind of communications with our community. But it depends really, you know, organization to organization, what's going to work, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So why don't we, let's see if anyone has, oh, let's see, Julia says, that private people can post pictures, but influencers can't. Okay, got it. Also, when I looked at the article, it looks like Chiara Ferragni actually, she did a photo shoot in the Uffizi with a professional photographer for Vogue. And
Oh,
yeah, so I understand the context now. Yeah, Vogue Hong Kong. Okay, so why don't Deborah and Louise, would you introduce everyone about how do they join Art Mavens? How, you know, tell us a little bit about, show us the platform a little bit.
Yeah, I can see, I think there are one or two questions, aren't there?
Oh,
but very much, I think it would be best perhaps to screen share and show everyone what we're talking about. Okay, Deborah, do you want to, or shall I? I'm just going to see if I can. For some reason, I was having difficulties earlier.
do you want me to go in?
I think I might need you to. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. All right.
Brilliant.
I can see your mouse. If you'd like to talk through it, I'll navigate as you speak.
Okay. So this is our homepage. The URL, we'll pop this in the chat as well. Where have I lost it? I've lost the chat and I've gone into questions, but I'll pop that in a moment. So this is it's artmavens.io, and this is the landing page, which gives us a bit more background. Thank you very much for listing the URL, and tells a bit more about us. Now, essentially, from the homepage, you can go onto the community or pro. And so if you want to join the community, you just request an invitation and we will get back to you, and then you can join and then just download basically. So yeah, so you sign up here and then you can download the shell of the app, but you do need an invitation to join. Okay, Deborah's going, are you going into the community now?
Well, I was just showing how you can log in.
Okay, brilliant. I can screen share a desktop in a second, hopefully from the community. And then so you can log in on the desktop, but we recommend really for functionality to use the app. It's really useful things like push notifications for news and updates, that the functionality is actually better on the app than it is on the desktop. And so should we go to Pro next?
Yeah.
So on Pro, this is again the landing page. And it just gives you details of how you can register on Pro. So you either want to hire a freelancer or work as a freelancer, and you just follow the prompts, either to post a job or to register your profile.
And so I think we had someone in the questions asking about Pro being a paid service. Could you explain a little bit how that works?
Yeah, Pro is a free service to use. If I go onto the freelancer tips here, Pro is absolutely free to use. So you would register on it for free and automatically receive any jobs that are listed that correspond. So we have developed an algorithm whereby the employers will receive notifications of the top candidates for their requirements. So it's really important when you register on Pro that you take the time to click on a series of skills or specialities. You know, you could be an old masters specialist or a contemporary art specialist, for example. So the more you fill in, the better you'll come up on the algorithm. And then you will be notified of any freelance jobs that appear that are of relevance to you. When you do take a job and agree on a contract, Pro simplifies everything for you. So you no longer have to draw up a contract with the employer. You no longer have to chase the funds, because the minute that you agree on a price and on milestones with the employer, we will take the payment in for you. Our payment partner puts it in escrow, so on hold. When you complete the job and you click you've completed it, the employer confirms that they've received it, the funds are immediately transferred to you. And so that was really our goal. We wanted to be sure that freelancers got fair and punctual pay. And that's been how we've done it. Now, of course, there's a cost to running that. So when you take on a job, when you receive payment, only when you receive payment, we will deduct a 10% service fee for that. But we've plugged in a calculator so that you can reverse calculate and be sure you know exactly how much you received net in your bank account. So no bad surprises. The calculator, when you take on a job, will tell you how much how much you should be charging if you're expecting, £1,500 net in your account. So that's how it works. But it's completely free to join, completely free to apply. And we've been so lucky. There are some amazing profiles on the platform. It's really it's really coming together beautifully.
And I think when we started developing Pro in particular, we're looking at some of the research that's come out. The Mayor of London has conducted some research into freelancers across the creative industries, not just the visual arts. And their key finding, it's not unsurprising, but their key finding here is that from a freelancer's perspective, the one major challenge and issue that they were constantly facing is payment and late payment and having to chase payment. And so we really hope to rectify that on this particular platform. So as soon as a milestone is completed, as soon as a job or a project is ended, you are paid. And so that's the kind of key thing. The other thing that we obviously love to sort of hear about and find out more about, and we're in the process of creating, is a survey for freelancers in the visual arts. So we'd love to hear from people if you have particular experiences, anonymously, to share. And obviously, as we develop this platform as well, it'd be great to have more feedback from everyone.
Great. Well, and I think especially when you're thinking about, those problems of getting paid, those tend to also disproportionately affect women and BIPOC, people of color, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's great to kind of have that security built in. I know I was listening to a very well-known podcast expert who, but she, runs her own business now, and she has, her own podcast. She was talking on this podcast. She was saying that there was actually quite a large commission that she did for a large company where she didn't get paid for 6 months, and she was afraid to ask because she was afraid to look bad within the industry, you know? So that's so tough, especially in creative industries where a lot of it is about those personal connections. It's nice to have that, everything insured.
It's taken away. Those conversations are taken away, and I think that's a great thing. It's just automated. It's just how it is. And these shifts in work, in freelance work, they need to be recognized. And I'm thrilled to hear that the London Mayor's actively, they're working towards a freelancer charter, to look at better conditions for freelancers.
Yeah, I think it's important. You know, I think there's been such a long period where the sort of gig economy has existed in you know, limbo, that it's time for some more structure to be put into place for those types of things. Okay, so wonderful. I think we're coming to the end of our time here together. So, you know, anyone who would like to join Art Mavens, please go check out this URL. Of course, we'll send you our recording tomorrow, which will also include the link if you need a reminder or you need to be sent the link tomorrow. Oh, sorry, one more question. Is Art Mavens reaches out to, is it live for US based pros?
We have professionals from around the world. Lo and behold, we have in Malaysia, Brazil, Cuba, Indonesia. It's really quite global. So please, yes, join us.
Perfect, wonderful. So we'll send out everything tomorrow. If you'd like to join either community or pro, we'll give you those links and you'll have the recording available to you. So thank you so much, Louise and Deborah, for joining us today. It was a wonderful conversation. And we look forward to, you know, doing lots of interesting projects together in future, I hope.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.